Captain Sarah Chen stood at the edge of the military supply depot, watching the last transport ship disappear into the star-filled darkness. The metal crates around her contained everything needed to defend Outpost 7, except the one thing that mattered most. No ammunition, no bullets, no hope according to the brass back at headquarters. The message had been clear and cold. Resources were being redirected to more strategic locations. Outpost 7, with its small garrison of 37 soldiers, wasn't worth the cost of a bullet shipment. They could surrender when the enemy arrived or fight with whatever they had. The choice was theirs, but the support wasn't coming. Sarah had served in the Human Defense Corps for 15 years. She'd seen action on 12 different worlds, earned more medals than she could count, and never once questioned an order. Until now, the bureaucrats sitting safely behind their desks had written off her people before the fight even began. They looked at numbers on a screen and decided these lives weren't worth saving, but they didn't know Sarah Chen. The other soldiers gathered around her in the dim light of the depot. Their faces showed the same mix of anger and despair she felt burning in her chest. These weren't career military like herself. Most were colonists who'd taken up arms when the alien invasion began. Farmers, miners, teachers, shop owners. Ordinary people who'd volunteered to stand between their families and an enemy that showed no mercy. "Captain," said Lieutenant Rodriguez, her second in command, "the long-range scanners are picking up movement. Enemy fleet, maybe 200 ships. They'll be here in 72 hours, Sarah nodded slowly. 200 ships against one small outpost. Without ammunition, they might as well throw rocks. The enemy had superior technology, overwhelming numbers, and no interest in taking prisoners. Every human settlement they'd hit had been completely destroyed. The population wiped out down to the last child. "Ma'am?" Private Johnson, barely 19 years old, stepped forward. "What are our orders?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Sarah could see the fear in their eyes, but also something else. Trust. They believed she would find a way. They believed she would protect them, even when their own government had abandoned them. Sarah had grown up on a mining world where nothing came easy. Her father had taught her that when the system failed you, you didn't sit around waiting for someone else to fix it. You rolled up your sleeves and built your own solution. That lesson had carried her through battles across the galaxy, and it would carry her through this one too. "Rodriguez, gather everyone in the main hall in 1 hour," she said. "Johnson, I need you to inventory every piece of metal, every chemical, every tool in this outpost, everything." "Yes, ma'am, but what are we looking for?" Sarah smiled for the first time in days. It wasn't a pleasant smile. It was the smile of someone who'd just made a dangerous decision. "We're going to make our own bullets, soldier. And we're going to show these aliens why you don't mess with humans." The next few hours revealed both the challenge and the opportunity ahead. Outpost 7 had been built around a mining operation, which meant it had smelting equipment, chemical processors, and fabrication tools. The mining company had left behind tons of raw materials when they evacuated. Most importantly, there were detailed manufacturing databases in the computer system. Sarah had studied metallurgy and chemistry before joining the military. She'd wanted to be an engineer, but the war had changed everyone's plans. Now those forgotten skills might save all their lives. The outpost's industrial equipment wasn't designed for making ammunition, but with some modifications it could work. The first problem was materials. Standard military bullets required specific alloys that weren't available, but the mining operation had extracted dozens of different metals from the asteroid belt. Some were even harder and denser than what the military used. Sarah began running calculations, testing different combinations. Private Martinez, who'd worked as a machinist before the war, joined her in the fabrication bay. "Captain, I've been looking at these industrial printers. If we can modify the programming, we might be able to manufacture casings." "Show me," Sarah said. For the next 6 hours, they worked side by side, redesigning manufacturing processes on the fly. The industrial equipment groaned and sparked as they pushed it beyond its intended limits. Other soldiers brought them food and coffee, but Sarah barely noticed. She was completely focused on the problem in front of her. The breakthrough came at dawn. Sarah had been experimenting with a tungsten-titanium alloy when she realized they were thinking about this all wrong. They didn't need to copy military ammunition exactly. They needed to make something better suited to their specific situation. The enemy ships had energy shields that could deflect standard projectiles. But the mining surveys had found something interesting in the local asteroids, a rare crystalline structure that was almost impossible to detect on sensors and had unusual electromagnetic properties. If they could incorporate that into their bullets, it might punch through energy shields like they weren't even there. "Rodriguez," Sarah called out, "get me a team to the asteroid mining site. I need samples of those crystal formations as much as they can carry." "Ma'am, that site was abandoned. No life support, no atmosphere." "Then they wear environmental suits. This is what's going to save us." As her team prepared for the dangerous mining mission, Sarah continued working on the manufacturing process. Each bullet would have to be crafted individually, no mass production. But that also meant each one could be optimized for maximum effect. She designed them with hollow points filled with the crystalline material, surrounded by the tungsten-titanium alloy. The enemy would expect desperate humans with inadequate weapons. Instead, they'd face ammunition that was unlike anything in their databases. Bullets that could pierce their shields and deliver devastating damage. Sarah wasn't just making ammunition, she was crafting the tools of vengeance. Time was running short. The enemy fleet was accelerating toward them, and they still had thousands of bullets to manufacture. But for the first time since receiving that cold dismissal from headquarters, Sarah felt hope. They'd been written off and abandoned, but they weren't helpless. She looked around at her soldiers working frantically to prepare their defense. They deserved better than to be sacrificed for political convenience. They deserved to fight back with everything they had, and thanks to her father's lessons about self-reliance, that's exactly what they were going to do. The aliens were about to learn a very painful lesson about human ingenuity. The mining expedition returned just as the enemy fleet appeared on the outer edge of the solar system. Private Martinez stumbled into the fabrication bay, his environmental suit covered in crystalline dust that sparkled like diamonds under the harsh industrial lighting. Behind him, 3 other soldiers carried containers filled with the strange crystal formations Sarah needed. "Captain, you need to see this," Martinez gasped, pulling off his helmet. "These crystals, they're not like anything in our databases. When we cut into the asteroid, they started glowing, and the electromagnetic readings were off the charts." Sarah examined one of the crystal samples under a microscope. The structure was unlike anything she'd studied in her engineering courses. It seemed to bend light around itself, creating optical illusions that made her eyes water. More importantly, when she tested it with the electromagnetic scanner, the readings fluctuated wildly. "Perfect," she said. "This will confuse their targeting systems completely." The next 18 hours became a blur of constant work. Sarah had divided her soldiers into teams. One group focused on manufacturing the bullet casings using the modified industrial printers. Another team worked on preparing the tungsten-titanium alloy, melting down mining equipment and refining it into the exact specifications she needed. A third group carefully processed the crystals, breaking them into fragments small enough to fit inside the hollow point ammunition. The work was dangerous. The smelting equipment wasn't designed for the temperatures required to work with tungsten-titanium. Twice they had to evacuate the fabrication bay when the furnaces overheated. Private Rodriguez suffered burns on her hands when a crucible cracked. But she refused medical treatment until her shift was complete. "Ma'am," said Sergeant Kim, the outpost's communications specialist, "I'm picking up chatter from the enemy fleet. They're discussing landing zones, talking about how quickly they can cleanse this location." Sarah didn't look up from the bullet she was carefully assembling. Each one required precise calibration. Too much crystal and the bullet would be unstable. Too little and it wouldn't penetrate the energy shields. "What's their estimated arrival time?" 47 hours, ma'am. 47 hours to manufacture enough ammunition to fight off 200 ships. The math was brutal, but Sarah had never backed down from impossible odds before. She increased the production schedule, pushing her people and the equipment to their absolute limits. The breakthrough in efficiency came from an unexpected source. Private Thompson, who'd been a chemistry teacher before the war, suggested using the outpost's water recycling system to rapidly cool the finished bullets. This cut manufacturing time in half and allowed them to produce higher quality ammunition. "You're brilliant, Thompson," Sarah said, watching as perfectly formed bullets rolled out of their improvised assembly line. Each one was a work of art, engineered for maximum damage against an enemy that thought humans were primitive and weak. By hour 36, they had manufactured 800 bullets. It wasn't enough for a prolonged battle, but it was enough to make a statement. Sarah gathered her soldiers in the main hall for a final briefing. The faces looking back at her were tired but determined. They'd worked without sleep, pushing themselves beyond normal human limits. "Listen up," Sarah began. "Intelligence reports indicate the enemy will send down assault shuttles first. Probably 50 to 60 craft. Each shuttle carries about 20 soldiers. They'll try to establish a beachhead before bringing down their heavy equipment." She activated the holographic display, showing the outpost's defensive positions. "We have 37 people and 800 very special bullets. Every shot has to count. Every bullet we've made is designed to punch through their energy shields and deliver maximum damage. These aren't just projectiles, they're precision instruments." Lieutenant Rodriguez raised her hand. "Ma'am, what makes you so sure these bullets will work?" Sarah smiled. It was the same dangerous smile she'd worn when she first decided to make their own ammunition. "Because I designed them specifically to kill these particular aliens. Standard military ammunition is designed to work against any enemy. Our bullets are designed to work against this enemy." She explained the science behind her design. The crystalline fragments would disrupt the enemy's energy shields by creating electromagnetic interference. The tungsten-titanium alloy would retain its shape and momentum even after penetrating the shields. The hollow point design would ensure maximum damage once the bullet reached its target. "But ma'am," said Private Johnson, "even if every bullet hits, even if they all work perfectly, we're still outnumbered 20 to 1. "That's where tactics come in," Sarah replied. "The enemy expects us to fight like desperate humans with inadequate weapons. Instead, we're going to fight like apex predators with perfect tools. We'll make them think twice about underestimating humanity." The plan was elegant in its simplicity. They would allow the enemy shuttles to land, drawing them into carefully prepared killing fields. The outpost's defensive positions had been modified to create crossfire zones where every shot would have maximum effect. Sarah had studied the enemy's tactical patterns from previous battles. They always followed the same approach: overwhelming force applied with mechanical precision. But mechanical precision was also predictable, and predictable enemies could be defeated by humans willing to think creatively. As the enemy fleet moved closer, Sarah made final adjustments to their ammunition. Each bullet was hand-inspected, every measurement verified. Her soldiers cleaned their weapons with religious devotion, understanding that their lives depended on perfect mechanical function. The enemy's advanced scouts had already entered the system. Long-range sensors showed them conducting detailed scans of the outpost. Sarah knew they were analyzing defenses, counting personnel, estimating resistance levels. Their computers would calculate that 37 humans with limited ammunition posed negligible threat. They were about to discover how wrong computers could be. "Ma'am," Sergeant Kim called out from the communications station. "I'm intercepting enemy communications. They're calling this a routine cleansing operation. Estimated completion time is 4 hours." Sarah checked the ammunition one final time. 800 bullets, each one a masterpiece of human engineering and determination. 800 chances to prove that writing off humanity was a fatal mistake. 4 hours? Sarah said. "We'll see about that." The enemy ships moved into orbital position, their weapons charging for the preliminary bombardment that always preceded their ground assault. But Sarah wasn't worried about the orbital bombardment. The outpost bunkers could withstand that. She was thinking about what would happen when the enemy soldiers finally faced ammunition, designed by someone who refused to accept defeat. They'd denied her bullets, so she'd forged her own. Now it was time to show them why that had been a very bad idea. The orbital bombardment began at exactly 0600 hours, just as Sarah had predicted. Massive energy beams lanced down from the alien fleet, striking the outpost's outer defenses with devastating precision. The ground shook violently, throwing dust and debris into the air, but the reinforced bunkers held firm. Sarah crouched in the command bunker, watching her tactical displays as the enemy followed their standard playbook. First the bombardment to soften defenses, then the shuttle assault to establish ground control, finally the heavy equipment to complete the extermination. It was the same pattern they'd used on 17 human colonies, but this time someone had been paying attention. "Bombardment stopping, ma'am," reported Sergeant Kim. "Detecting inbound shuttles. 63 craft approaching from multiple vectors." Sarah nodded grimly. 63 shuttles meant approximately 1,200 enemy soldiers. Against 37 humans, those were impossible odds by any conventional measure. But Sarah had stopped thinking conventionally the moment headquarters abandoned them. "All units to positions," she commanded. "Remember, let them land. Let them think they've won. We want them confident and careless." Through the bunker's periscope, Sarah watched the first wave of shuttles touch down in the designated landing zones. The enemy soldiers that emerged were exactly what intelligence reports had described. 7 feet tall, heavily armored, moving with mechanical precision. Their energy shields flickered around them like personal force fields, deflecting small debris kicked up by their landing thrusters. These shields had made the aliens nearly invincible in previous battles. Human bullets simply bounced off, while the aliens' weapons cut through human armor like paper. It was the technological advantage that had allowed them to steamroll through human space with minimal losses. Sarah smiled as she watched them advance toward the outpost's outer perimeter. Those shields were about to become a liability. "First target is moving into position 7, whispered Private Martinez over the comm. He was hidden in a carefully camouflaged position with a clear line of sight to the main approach route. "Range, 400 meters. Hold fire," Sarah ordered. "Let them get closer. Every shot has to count." The alien formations moved forward with textbook precision, their shields glowing steadily as they advanced. Sarah had counted on this. Their confidence in their defensive technology made them predictable. They didn't take cover, didn't vary their approach patterns, didn't show any awareness that they might be walking into a trap. "Range, 200 meters, Martinez reported. "Hold," Sarah repeated. At 100 meters, the aliens stopped to reorganize their formations. It was exactly what Sarah had hoped for. Bunched together, stationary targets well within optimal range for the ammunition she'd designed. "All units," Sarah said calmly. "Fire at will." The first shot came from Martinez's position. Sarah watched through her scope as the specially designed bullet streaked toward the lead alien. The moment it contacted the energy shield, something beautiful happened. The crystalline fragments embedded in the bullet created a cascade of electromagnetic interference that rippled across the shield's surface like water. For a fraction of a second, the shield flickered and died. The tungsten titanium core of the bullet punched through the alien's armor as if it were tissue paper. The hollow point design expanded on impact, creating devastating internal damage. The alien dropped instantly, its weapon clattering to the ground, but that was just the beginning. 36 more shots rang out simultaneously, each one targeting a different alien soldier. 36 more shields failed in brilliant displays of electromagnetic chaos. 36 more enemies fell, their supposedly superior technology useless against human ingenuity. The effect on the surviving aliens was immediate and dramatic. For the first time in their invasion of human space, they had encountered resistance that could penetrate their defenses. Panic spread through their ranks like wildfire. Their mechanical precision dissolved into confusion as they scrambled for cover that their tactics manuals hadn't prepared them to find. "Second wave, engage," Sarah ordered. Another volley of precisely aimed shots brought down 30 more aliens. The crystalline ammunition was performing even better than Sarah had hoped. Not only did it disrupt the energy shields, but the electromagnetic interference was spreading between nearby shields, creating chain reactions that left entire squads vulnerable. The remaining aliens tried to retreat to their shuttles, but Sarah had positioned her soldiers to control all the escape routes. The killing field was perfectly designed with overlapping fields of fire that gave the enemy nowhere to run. "Ma'am," called Private Johnson from his position on the outpost's eastern wall. "Second wave of shuttles is launching from the main fleet. Looks like they're sending reinforcements." Sarah had expected this. The first assault had been intended as a quick strike to overwhelm minimal resistance. When that failed catastrophically, the aliens would escalate. "More shuttles, heavier weapons, possibly even orbital support. How many?" she asked. 40 shuttles this time, ma'am, and they look bigger than the first wave." Sarah did the math quickly. If the larger shuttles carried 30 soldiers each, that meant 1,200 more enemies. Even with their superior ammunition, her people didn't have enough bullets to fight off that many aliens. They'd expended over 300 rounds in the first engagement. But that was fine. Sarah had never intended to win through superior firepower alone. "All units phase 2, she announced. "Fall back to secondary positions. Implement the Murphy Doctrine." The Murphy Doctrine was something Sarah had developed during her years of combat experience. It was named after the old saying that anything that could go wrong would go wrong, but with a twist. Instead of trying to prevent things from going wrong, you planned for them to go wrong in ways that hurt your enemy more than they hurt you. As her soldiers withdrew to the secondary positions, they left behind a surprise for the incoming reinforcements. Sarah had spent the last few hours rigging the outpost's industrial equipment with explosive charges. When the second wave of aliens landed and advanced toward what appeared to be an abandoned facility, they would trigger a series of carefully planned accidents. The mining equipment would explode, sending shrapnel in predetermined directions. The chemical storage tanks would rupture, releasing toxic clouds that would force the aliens to rely on their environmental seals that Sarah's crystalline ammunition could disrupt just as effectively as it disrupted energy shields. Most importantly, the smelting furnaces would overload, creating a localized electromagnetic pulse that would disable any alien technology within a 2-kilometer radius. For a few crucial minutes, the aliens would be fighting with nothing but their physical capabilities against humans who knew every inch of the terrain. "Second wave is landing," reported Johnson. "They're being more cautious this time, spreading out their formations." Sarah nodded approvingly. The aliens were learning, adapting their tactics based on the devastating losses they'd suffered. That showed intelligence and flexibility. It also showed that they no longer considered this a routine operation. Good. Overconfidence had always been humanity's greatest enemy. Now it was working in their favor. "Wait for them to reach the trigger points," Sarah instructed. "Let them think they're being smart." As the alien reinforcements advanced toward the seemingly abandoned outpost, Sarah allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. Headquarters had written them off as expendable, not worth the cost of a bullet shipment. The aliens had expected easy prey. Both sides were about to learn that humans were at their most dangerous, when they had nothing left to lose and everything to prove. The second wave of aliens moved through the outer compound with careful precision, their sensors scanning for the humans who had inflicted such devastating casualties on their first assault. Sarah watched them from her concealed position in the secondary bunker complex, counting steps as they approached the carefully prepared trigger zones. 200 alien soldiers advanced in perfect formation, their energy shields glowing steadily in the dim light. They had learned from the previous disaster, maintaining proper spacing and covering all angles. Their tactics were flawless, their equipment superior, their numbers overwhelming. None of it would matter in about 30 seconds. "Trigger point Alpha in 5 seconds," Sarah whispered into her comm. Around the compound, her soldiers tensed at their positions, fingers ready to detonate the charges that would turn the aliens' methodical advance into a nightmare. "Now," she said quietly. The mining equipment exploded first. Massive industrial drills and excavation tools erupted in carefully directed blasts, sending chunks of metal the size of small vehicles flying through the alien formations. The tungsten titanium fragments Sarah had embedded in the charges punched through energy shields as easily as her bullets had, turning defensive advantages into death traps. Before the aliens could react to the first explosions, the chemical storage tanks ruptured. Toxic mining compounds that had been safely contained for decades suddenly filled the air with caustic clouds. The aliens' environmental seals activated automatically, switching their systems to internal air supplies and reducing their operational effectiveness by 40%. Then the smelting furnaces overloaded. The electromagnetic pulse that erupted from the superheated machinery was unlike anything in standard military arsenals. Sarah had designed it specifically to interact with the crystalline fragments scattered throughout the compound from their ammunition manufacturing. The result was a localized EMP burst that didn't just disable electronics, it created a field of electromagnetic chaos that made the aliens' advanced technology completely unreliable. Energy shields flickered and died. Communication systems failed. Weapon targeting arrays went haywire, unable to lock onto targets through the interference. For the first time since beginning their invasion of human space, the aliens found themselves fighting without technological superiority. "All units, engage," Sarah commanded. Her soldiers emerged from their concealed positions like ghosts materializing from the shadows. They moved with the smooth coordination of a team that had trained together for months instead of hours. Each shooter had been assigned specific targets and backup targets. Each shot had been planned and rehearsed. The aliens, stumbling through toxic clouds with failing equipment, made easy targets. Private Martinez dropped 3 aliens with 3 shots, his rifle cycling smoothly as he worked through his assigned sector. The crystalline ammunition was performing perfectly, each bullet carrying enough electromagnetic interference to disrupt any shields that had managed to stay online. Sergeant Rodriguez led a flanking team that caught a squad of aliens trying to establish a defensive position near the main fabrication building. Her soldiers moved like hunting wolves, striking from multiple angles before disappearing back into the maze of industrial equipment. But it was Private Thompson who provided the most crucial intelligence. The former chemistry teacher had been monitoring the aliens' communications equipment, using the outpost's remaining sensors to decode their transmissions. "Ma'am," he called out over the comm, "I'm picking up panic signals from the alien fleet. They're calling for immediate evacuation of all ground forces." Sarah paused in the middle of reloading her rifle. Evacuation? That didn't match the aliens' usual pattern. In every previous engagement, they had simply sent more forces until human resistance was completely crushed. "Are you sure?" she asked. "Positive, ma'am. And there's something else. They're sending technical teams to analyze the battlefield. They want to understand how we're penetrating their shields." This was the moment Sarah had been hoping for. The aliens had finally encountered something they couldn't immediately understand or counter. Their technological superiority had been challenged, and they were responding like any intelligent species would, by trying to figure out what had gone wrong. "All units, new orders," Sarah announced. "We're not just fighting for survival anymore. We're fighting to protect our tactical advantage. No alien technology can be allowed to fall into enemy hands intact, destroy everything." The battle shifted into a new phase. Instead of simply trying to kill as many aliens as possible, Sarah's soldiers began systematically destroying any equipment the aliens dropped. Weapons were shattered with precise shots. Communication devices were melted with concentrated chemical fire. Even alien bodies were rendered unrecognizable to prevent biological analysis. The aliens, realizing what was happening, began fighting more desperately. They understood that their technological edge was slipping away, and they needed to salvage something from this disaster. Small groups broke off from the main force, trying to secure samples of the human ammunition or the electromagnetic interference devices. Sarah had anticipated this too. "Rodriguez, take your team to the ammunition storage bunker," she ordered. "If anyone gets near our remaining bullets, destroy them all. I'd rather fight with rocks than let the aliens figure out how to counter our advantage." The battle for the ammunition bunker became the most intense fighting of the engagement. 12 alien soldiers, their equipment still partially functional, made a coordinated assault on the reinforced position. They moved with the desperation of soldiers who knew their species' survival might depend on the intelligence they could gather. Rodriguez and her team of 5 humans met them at the bunker entrance. The fighting was close and brutal, with no room for tactical maneuvering. But the humans had 2 advantages the aliens couldn't match. They were fighting for their families, and they had ammunition designed specifically to kill these particular enemies. When the smoke cleared, all 12 aliens were dead. Rodriguez had taken a hit to the shoulder, but the ammunition was secure. "Ma'am," called Sergeant Kim from the communication station, "the alien fleet is pulling back to minimum safe distance. They're actually afraid of us." Sarah looked around at her soldiers. 37 humans with fewer than 200 bullets remaining had just forced a fleet of 200 alien warships to retreat. It should have been impossible. According to every tactical manual ever written, they should all be dead by now. Instead, they had achieved something unprecedented in the war against the alien invasion. They had won a defensive battle without losing a single person. But Sarah knew this was just the beginning. The aliens would analyze what had happened here. They would adapt their technology and tactics. Eventually, they would develop countermeasures for her crystalline ammunition, unless she found a way to stay ahead of them. "Johnson," she called out, "how much of those crystal samples do we have left?" "About 60%, ma'am. Enough to manufacture maybe 400 more bullets." Sarah smiled her dangerous smile again. 400 bullets and a fleet of alien ships that no longer considered humans easy prey. The balance of power hadn't shifted permanently, but it had shifted enough to matter. And if there was one thing Sarah had learned during her years of military service, it was that when you had an enemy's attention, you used every second of it to your advantage. The alien fleet maintained its distance for 6 hours while Sarah and her team worked frantically to manufacture more ammunition. The crystalline fragments had performed beyond all expectations. But Sarah knew the aliens were using this time to analyze everything that had happened. Every failed shield, every disrupted communication, every tactical surprise was being studied by their best scientists. Sarah stood in the fabrication bay, watching the industrial equipment that had become humanity's secret weapon. The modified printers worked steadily, producing bullet casings with mechanical precision. But her mind was already moving beyond the current battle, thinking about the larger implications of what they had accomplished. "Ma'am," said Lieutenant Rodriguez, her arm in a sling from the bunker assault but still refusing to rest. "Intelligence is picking up massive data transmissions from the alien fleet. They're sending everything they've recorded back to their home systems." This was what Sarah had feared. Once the alien leadership understood how humans had overcome their shields, they would develop countermeasures. The crystalline ammunition that had given humanity its first real victory would become obsolete within weeks, maybe days, unless she could find a way to stay ahead of their adaptation. "Thompson," she called to the former chemistry teacher, "you said those crystals created electromagnetic interference when we cut into them. What exactly did you mean?" Thompson looked up from the ammunition assembly line where he'd been carefully filling hollow point bullets with crystal fragments. "The interference wasn't random, ma'am. It seemed to respond to the presence of energy fields. The stronger the field, the more intense the disruption." Sarah felt a spark of inspiration. "So the crystals aren't just creating static interference. They're actively reacting to alien technology?" That's what it looked like. Almost like they were designed specifically to disrupt that type of energy manipulation. A wild theory began forming in Sarah's mind. The crystals had been found in asteroids throughout this system. The mining surveys had noted their unusual properties but dismissed them as commercially worthless. What if they weren't naturally occurring? What if they were the remnant of some ancient defensive system? "Martinez," she called out, "I need you to take a team back to the asteroid mining site. But this time I want you to go deeper. Look for anything that might indicate these crystals were artificially created." "Ma'am, the aliens are likely to resume their assault soon. Should we really be dividing our forces?" Sarah looked at the tactical display showing the alien fleet's positions. They were maintaining perfect formation, but their energy signatures indicated they were charging weapons for another orbital bombardment. The aliens had learned that direct assault was too costly. Now they would try to destroy the outpost from orbit. "The bombardment will last 3 hours," Sarah said, reading the enemy's intentions from their formation patterns. "That gives us a window to find answers. If these crystals are what I think they are, we might have found something bigger than just better ammunition." While Martinez's team prepared for another dangerous EVA mission, Sarah focused on the immediate problem of surviving the orbital bombardment. The outpost's bunkers could withstand conventional energy weapons, but the aliens had just witnessed the failure of their ground assault. They would escalate to their heaviest weapons. "Kim," she said to the communications specialist, "send a message to all human colonies in this sector. Priority Alpha encryption. Tell them what we've accomplished here and how we did it. If these aliens are going to adapt to our tactics, then every human settlement needs to know what works against them. Ma'am, command protocols require authorization from fleet headquarters before transmitting tactical intelligence." Sarah's expression hardened. "The same headquarters that denied us ammunition and left us to die? Send the message, Sergeant. That's a direct order." As Kim began transmitting the crystalline ammunition specifications to human settlements across 3 star systems, Sarah turned her attention to surviving what was about to become the most intensive orbital bombardment in human history. The alien fleet had moved into optimal firing positions. 200 ships, each one capable of destroying a city, all focused on one small outpost that had dared to fight back effectively. Sarah had no illusions about their chances of survival. The bunkers would hold for a while, but eventually the sheer volume of firepower would overwhelm their defenses, unless she could give the aliens something else to worry about. "Rodriguez, I need you to take half our remaining ammunition and set up firing positions in the outer perimeter," Sarah ordered. "Ma'am, that's suicide. The bombardment will start any minute." "Exactly. The aliens expect us to hide in our bunkers and wait for them to dig us out. Instead, we're going to be shooting at their ships during the bombardment." Rodriguez stared at her in disbelief. "Ma'am, our weapons don't have the range to hit ships in orbit." Sarah smiled. "They don't have to. We just need to make the aliens think we might have weapons that can reach them. When they start detecting projectile launches from the surface during their bombardment, they'll have to assume we've developed orbital range capabilities. It was a psychological warfare tactic, pure and simple. The aliens had just discovered that humans were more technologically capable than their intelligence indicated. Now Sarah was going to make them paranoid about what other surprises might be waiting for them. The orbital bombardment began with devastating intensity. Energy beams that could melt battleship armor struck the outpost's defenses in coordinated waves. The ground shook so violently that several soldiers were thrown from their feet. Emergency lighting failed throughout the bunker complex, leaving them in darkness broken only by the hellish glow of superheated rock. And in the middle of this devastation, Rodriguez and her team calmly set up their rifles and began shooting at the sky. The crystalline ammunition created brilliant flashes of electromagnetic interference as the bullets disintegrated in the upper atmosphere. From orbit, it would look exactly like some kind of advanced defensive system was engaging their ships. The aliens couldn't detect the actual bullets, but they could see the energy signatures as clearly as if someone was firing anti-ship missiles at them. "Ma'am," called out Kim over the thunder of the bombardment, "I'm detecting course changes in the alien fleet. They're pulling back to maximum range." Sarah allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. The aliens were now afraid of a 37-person garrison that was hiding in underground bunkers and shooting regular bullets into the sky. Fear was making them cautious, and caution was giving her people time to work. Martinez's voice crackled over the comm from the asteroid mining site. "Captain, you need to hear this. We found something in the deeper excavations. These crystals aren't natural. They're part of some kind of ancient network. And ma'am, I think it's still active." Sarah's blood ran cold. An active ancient network that created technology-disrupting crystals, found throughout a star system that was now under alien attack. This wasn't coincidence. This was the remnant of some previous civilization's defense system. A civilization that had faced the same enemy humanity was fighting now. "Martinez, get back here immediately, and bring everything you can carry." As the orbital bombardment continued to rain down around them, Sarah realized that her desperate gamble to create better ammunition had uncovered something far more significant. The crystals weren't just a tactical advantage. They were a key to understanding how to fight an enemy that had been conquering star systems for millennia. But first, she had to keep her people alive long enough to figure out what that key unlocked. Martinez returned during a brief lull in the bombardment, his environmental suit covered in the same crystalline dust that had marked their first expedition. But this time he carried something different. In his hands was a chunk of crystal the size of a human head, pulsing with internal light that seemed to respond to the alien energy weapons striking the outpost above. "Captain, this is incredible," Martinez gasped as he pulled off his helmet. The deeper we went into the asteroid, the more organized the crystal formations became. They're not random deposits, they're a network. And when the orbital bombardment started, they began activating. Sarah examined the large crystal under emergency lighting. Unlike the smaller fragments they'd been using in their ammunition, this specimen was clearly artificial. Its faceted surface was too perfect, too purposeful to be natural. And the way it pulsed with light in rhythm with the alien weapons fire suggested it was more than just a passive defense mechanism. "Thompson, I need your analysis," Sarah called to the chemistry teacher. "What are we looking at?" Thompson ran his scanner over the crystal's surface, frowning at the readings. "Ma'am, this is giving off energy signatures I've never seen before. It's not just disrupting electromagnetic fields, it's analyzing them, learning from them." The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. An ancient network of crystals that could learn and adapt to enemy technology. A defensive system left behind by some previous civilization that had fought the same aliens now attacking human space. "Ma'am?" interrupted Kim from the communication station. "I'm picking up something strange from the alien fleet. Their weapons are starting to malfunction. Energy output is fluctuating across all ships." Sarah looked at the large crystal pulsing in Martinez's hands, then at the smaller fragments they'd been using to manufacture ammunition. The network wasn't just passive, it was fighting back. Every shot fired by the alien fleet was being analyzed, categorized, and countered by an ancient defense system that was still protecting the star system, after who knew how many centuries. "Rodriguez, gather everyone in the main bunker. We need to understand what we're dealing with." As her 37 soldiers assembled around the glowing crystal, Sarah began to piece together a theory that seemed impossible, but explained everything they'd witnessed. The aliens hadn't chosen this system at random. They'd come here specifically because their sensors had detected the crystal network. They knew what it was and wanted to destroy it before it could be used against them. Listen carefully, Sarah began. I think we've stumbled into the middle of a war that's been going on for thousands of years. These crystals are the remnant of some ancient civilization's defense network. The aliens aren't here to wipe out human colonists. They're here to eliminate a threat they thought was extinct. Private Johnson raised his hand uncertainly. Ma'am, are you saying we're fighting alongside ghosts? Not ghosts, Sarah replied, studying the crystal's pulsing patterns. Ghosts don't build technology that can learn and adapt. I think we're fighting alongside the automated defenses of a civilization that faced the same enemy we're facing now. Thompson looked up from his continued analysis of the crystal. Captain, if that's true, then these aliens have been doing this for a very long time, conquering civilizations, destroying their defensive networks, moving on to the next target. We're just the latest in a long line of victims. Sarah nodded grimly. Except this time they missed something. The crystal network in this system survived whatever destroyed its builders, and now it's active again, learning from their current technology. The orbital bombardment had stopped completely. Through the bunker's periscope, Sarah could see the alien fleet maintaining position but no longer firing. Their weapons had been neutralized by an ancient defense system that was growing, stronger with every passing hour. Ma'am, called out Sergeant Kim, I'm detecting massive power buildups throughout the asteroid belt. Whatever this network is, it's fully activating. Sarah felt a mixture of hope and terror. Hope because humanity had found an ally in their desperate fight for survival. Terror because they were dealing with technology beyond their understanding, created by a civilization that had still been destroyed despite possessing such advanced defenses. Rodriguez, I need you to establish communication with fleet headquarters. Full emergency protocols. They need to know what we've found here. Ma'am, communications are still being jammed by electromagnetic interference from the crystal network. Sarah studied the large crystal that Martinez had brought back from the asteroid. If the network was as intelligent as she suspected, it might be capable of more than just jamming enemy weapons. It might be capable of communication. Thompson, can you modify our communication array to interface directly with the crystal network? The former chemistry teacher looked at her as if she'd suggested communicating with lightning. Ma'am, I wouldn't even know where to begin. This technology is completely outside human understanding. Then we learn, Sarah said firmly. The same way we learned to manufacture ammunition from mining equipment. We adapt, we improvise, and we refuse to give up. As her team worked to establish some form of communication with the ancient network, Sarah watched the alien fleet through the periscope. The ships were maintaining their positions, but seemed to be running continuous diagnostics on their weapon systems. They knew their technology had been compromised, and they were trying to understand how, but Sarah suspected they wouldn't figure it out in time. The crystal network had been designed specifically to counter their type of technology. It had been waiting in dormancy for centuries, ready to activate the moment its ancient enemy returned. Ma'am, called out Martinez excitedly, I think I've found something. The crystal is responding to direct physical contact. When I touch it, the energy patterns change. Sarah approached the crystal cautiously. If Martinez was right, then the network might be trying to establish contact with them. The question was whether humanity was ready to become part of a war that had been raging across the galaxy for millennia. She reached out and placed her palm against the crystal's faceted surface. The moment her skin made contact, images flooded her mind. Visions of vast fleets engaging in battles among the stars. Civilizations rising and falling as the alien conquerors move systematically through the galaxy. And through it all, networks of crystals like this one, fighting desperately to protect their creators. But Sarah also saw something else. She saw the aliens' weakness. Their reliance on energy-based technology made them vulnerable to the electromagnetic disruption the crystals created. More importantly, she saw how the ancient civilizations had eventually learned to use the crystal networks as weapons, not just defenses. When the visions faded, Sarah found herself surrounded by concerned faces. She had been unconscious for several minutes, but the knowledge she'd gained was worth the risk. I know how to win this war, she said quietly, but we're going to need a lot more crystals. 3 months after the Battle of Outpost 7, Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the HSC Defiance, flagship of humanity's first truly effective fleet. Around her, displays showed the positions of 47 human vessels, each one equipped with crystalline technology that had transformed them from prey into predators. The knowledge she'd gained from direct contact with the ancient network had changed everything. The crystals weren't just defensive tools. They were components of a galaxy-spanning weapon system designed to hunt down and eliminate the alien conquerors, wherever they tried to establish themselves. "Admiral Chen," called out her communications officer. Sarah still wasn't used to the promotion that had come with her new role as commander of humanity's Crystal Fleet. "We're receiving final positioning reports from all task forces. Operation Liberation is ready to commence." Through the bridge viewports, Sarah could see the alien fleet that had once terrified an entire sector. 200 ships that had seemed invincible 3 months ago now appeared almost fragile against the backdrop of stars. Their energy shields flickered uncertainly, their weapons charged and discharged in random patterns as the crystalline interference networks disrupted their targeting systems. "Status report on the primary crystal array?" Sarah asked. Lieutenant Martinez, now her chief of crystalline technology integration, checked his readings. "All network nodes are synchronized, ma'am. We have full coverage of the target zone. The ancient protocols are active and responding to our commands." Sarah nodded with satisfaction. The network had been designed to be controlled by the civilizations it protected, but only when they proved worthy through combat. By refusing to surrender when abandoned, by forging their own weapons when denied proper equipment, Sarah and her small garrison had earned the network's recognition as legitimate inheritors of its power. "Admiral," reported her sensor specialist, "the aliens are attempting to retreat. They're bringing their engines online." Sarah had expected this. The aliens had finally realized that their technological advantage was not just neutralized, but actively turned against them. Every weapon they fired made the crystal network stronger. Every shield they activated provided more data for the ancient systems to analyze and counter. "All ships implement containment protocol," Sarah ordered. "Don't let a single alien vessel escape this system." The human fleet moved with precision that would have been impossible before their integration with the crystal technology. The ancient network didn't just disrupt alien systems, it enhanced human ones. Reaction times improved, targeting became more accurate, tactical coordination reached levels that seemed almost telepathic. But Sarah knew the real power wasn't in the enhanced capabilities. It was in what the crystals had taught humanity about their enemy. The aliens weren't invincible conquerors. They were scavengers, following a pattern that had worked for millennia but had never adapted to real resistance. They conquered civilizations by overwhelming them with superior technology. But when that technology was neutralized, they had no fallback strategies. "Admiral, the alien flagship is transmitting on multiple frequencies," reported the communications officer. "It appears to be some kind of distress signal." Sarah considered this for a moment. In all the previous battles between humans and aliens, there had never been any attempt at communication. The aliens had simply attacked, destroyed everything in their path, and moved on. The fact that they were now trying to communicate suggested desperation. "Put it through the translation matrix," she ordered. "Let's hear what they have to say." The message that came through the speakers was unlike anything Sarah had expected. Instead of the mechanical precision that characterized all alien communications, this transmission was filled with what could only be described as panic. "Ancient network detected. Prototype defenses active. Requesting immediate evacuation protocols. This sector is no longer suitable for harvest operations," Sarah smiled grimly. Harvest operations. That was how the aliens thought of their conquest of inhabited worlds. Not as warfare between civilizations, but as harvesting resources from defenseless populations. "Thompson," she called to her science officer. "Analysis of the alien transmission?" The former chemistry teacher, now holding the rank of commander in the Human Crystal Corps, studied his readings carefully. "Admiral, they're not just afraid of our weapons. They're afraid of the network itself. Their databases contain warnings about civilizations that achieved integration with crystalline defense systems." "Warnings about what?" "About civilizations that stopped being prey and became hunters." Sarah felt a surge of fierce satisfaction. For thousands of years, the aliens had moved through the galaxy like a plague, destroying every civilization they encountered. They had never faced organized resistance that could match their technology. The crystal networks had been designed specifically to turn their own advantages against them. All ships final attack formation, Sarah commanded. It's time to show these aliens what happens when humanity refuses to be harvested. The Battle of the Crystal Network lasted exactly 17 minutes. The alien fleet, crippled by electromagnetic interference and facing weapons that grew more effective with every shot, was systematically destroyed with minimal human casualties. Not a single alien vessel escaped to carry word of humanity's new capabilities back to their home systems. But the victory was about more than one battle. As Sarah watched the last alien ship break apart under concentrated fire from crystalline-enhanced weapons, she knew that humanity had crossed a threshold. They were no longer a young civilization struggling to survive. They had become the inheritors of an ancient war, equipped with weapons and knowledge that made them capable of taking the fight directly to their enemies. "Admiral," reported Martinez from his crystalline technology station, "I'm detecting network activation signatures from 7 other star systems. The ancient defenses are coming online across multiple sectors." Sarah nodded. The network was vast, spanning hundreds of star systems throughout the galaxy. Most of the nodes had been dormant for centuries, waiting for the return of the enemy that had destroyed their builders. Now that the aliens had resumed their expansion into this region of space, the entire network was awakening. "Set course for the Kepler system," Sarah ordered. "Intelligence reports indicate a major alien staging area there. It's time to take this war to them." As the Crystal Fleet departed the system where it all began, Sarah thought about the message she had transmitted to Earth 3 days earlier. Headquarters had finally responded to her situation reports, offering full military support and official recognition of her tactical innovations. She had politely declined both offers. Humanity didn't need the support of bureaucrats who had been willing to sacrifice colonies for political convenience. The Crystal Network had chosen its inheritors based on merit, not politics. Those who had proven themselves in battle were welcomed into the ancient alliance. Those who had cowered behind desks were irrelevant. "Admiral," called out her communications officer, "incoming transmission from the Proxima Defense Force. They're requesting crystalline ammunition specifications and integration protocols." Sarah smiled. Word was spreading throughout human space. The colonies that had been written off and abandoned were learning that they didn't need to depend on distant governments for protection. They could forge their own weapons, build their own defenses, and join the growing network of civilizations that refused to be prey. "Transmit full specifications," Sarah ordered, "and send them the integration protocols. It's time for every human settlement to understand what we've learned here." That lesson was simple but profound. When the system fails you, you don't wait for someone else to fix it. You build something better with your own hands, prove yourself worthy of ancient allies, and take the fight directly to those who would destroy you. The aliens had denied humanity bullets, thinking it would make them helpless. Instead, it had forced them to forge weapons that could reshape the balance of power across the galaxy. Sarah Chen, the captain who had refused to surrender when abandoned, had become the admiral who would lead humanity's transformation from victim to victor. And in the depths of space, ancient crystal networks pulsed with renewed purpose, finally united with inheritors worthy of their power. The galaxy's long nightmare was far from over, but for the first time in millennia, the hunters had become the hunted.